So let's go ahead. So again, thanks everybody for joining today. This is our Study Skills Online workshop. So we're really focusing here today on working with you guys to better understand some study skills for the online environment. So my name is Kelly. I'm an academic coach. I'm normally housed at the Round Rock campus, but because we are all virtual, you get to see my face more regularly if you're not normally at the Round Rock. So I'm going to let my fellow presenters introduce themselves as well, and then we'll get started.
Hey, hi everybody. Good afternoon. I'm so happy that you guys could join us. I'm glad that I'm seeing such a packed house, which is cool. Yeah, thanks for joining us. We're excited to get started today.
And as mentioned earlier, welcome everyone. We're really thankful you were able to join us. My name is Valeria Flint, and with Jordan and Kelly, hopefully we're going to be able to give you some good tips and strategies in order to help you get better grades with less stress. So we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff, but particularly we're going to follow the study cycle. We're going to see how different moments, particular times is more important that you emphasize your preparation in order to be successful in all your classes. So at the end of this workshop, there's going to be a question and answer session. However, feel free to type in the chat or just unmute your mics and let us know if there's something that you'd like to know more about, or if you have a pressing question that you need to address at a specific time. But at the end, overall, we hope that you will learn more about the study cycle and all the different aspects when it comes to being prepared for class. Also, that you'll have a better understanding of your own study habits, since you're going to be presented with the ideal model. But we know that there's no ideal. We just try to do our best, right? Particularly in these current circumstances. And then finally, as mentioned, also, we're hoping that you'll gain better strategies and you'll be able to improve your current grades or just feel less stress, and not only for this semester, but also in all your academic career. Talking about the study cycle, can everyone see the slide? I know it's kind of small. Maybe you need to zoom it in. But I'll tell you, this is just a little summary, so no worries if you cannot read everything. I think Jordan is able to use the pointer, but if not, you can see on the left-hand side that there's preparation that is necessary at different times in class. So what we're going to focus on today specifically is going to be what you need to do before class, during lectures, and then after class. There's going to be future workshops where you're going to be able to get better test-taking skills. So we're just going to not go in depth in that area. Today, we're just focusing on how to be better prepared for learning better and for being able to do better in class. So the most important stuff, of course, in the beginning is to know what kind of student you are, right? So how many here, type in the chat, please, if you identify yourself as a procrastinator. No judging, just trying to get some data. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3. I should type me too, but oh well. Oh, I like Dahlia sometimes. Perfect. What about those students that are super organized? Those that need to have everything before class. You can't skip a detail. Do we have any of those here? Well, congrats. Now, what happens when your professor doesn't post everything at the time that you'd like them to do so, right? You still have to deal with it. It's a class, and you can't decide how they teach the class. So hopefully we're going to give you some strategies that will help you deal with that. In general, though, whether you're a procrastinator, super prepared, or you're somewhere in between, the important thing, as mentioned, is to know which kind of student you are, which one you want to be, and therefore start adopting some different habits, perhaps. But ones that always work is to be familiar with the syllabus, with your class schedule, to adopt a planner, and of course, to check the academic calendar. How many of you had not checked the academic calendar that ACC provides? I expect there's probably going to be the majority of you. Not a lot of people do, but no worries. Just know that it's out there. So you can plan not only your semester, but your whole year. However, having a planner is not only helpful to plan for the whole week, but also for the whole semester, as mentioned. But if you're taking more than one class, it's essential that you have one. And if the digital version that we've provided in our website, the academic coaching website, is not good, just, maybe you can get one at the dollar store, or any other kind of planner will do. Okay, so don't stress yourselves about the quality or how pretty they look. It's the content what matters. So if you're able to keep up with filling in what kind of assignments, tests, quizzes, or any other homework that you need to be knowing about for that week, that will lower the level of stress and the level of anxiety that you'll have. So therefore, your brain is going to be able to perform better because you already know what it is. And if you haven't visited a coach regarding your time management habits, we highly recommend that you do. And there are going to be a bunch of other rules that we're going to be seeing later. But for now, this is what I wanted to make sure. Check what kind of student you are. Make sure that you're familiar with documentation such as your class schedule and planner. And check the academic calendar if you haven't done so. All right, so now let's pretend, if we haven't done, maybe you have already, check all the other previous 4 items. So you already got your planner set. How do you start? Well, it depends what kind of class you're taking. So all of the classes at ACC are required to have a required textbook. So that means there's an assigned textbook for each class. But you can find that maybe some professor provides a review guide, maybe a study note, study guides, maybe some kind of lecture notes. Some professors provide you with the PowerPoints that they use, others don't. So depending on each class, you're going to be able to customize this strategies in order to prepare better. If you don't know where to start, a great idea is to go to the syllabus and check for the learning objectives. So if your professor hasn't provided a lot of guidance, then you can meet with them during office hours. But if that's not possible for whatever reason, or maybe you're taking an asynchronous class and your schedule is packed, then matching the learning objectives to the textbook or the material that you need to learn, that will help you give a framework with what you need to know, what you need to be familiar with, little by little. So by the time that the test comes, hopefully this week, I think is when everyone's taking the first test, you'll be more than ready. If none of that is possible, this is the safest way to go. So scan every chapter for most important headings, titles, keywords. If there are any pictures, diagrams, make sure you are familiar with them. There's always a chapter introduction and summary. Really essential that you pay attention to those and are very familiar with the main topics. Usually there's also like a glossary in some textbooks, and that gives you a better idea of the most important items that have been highlighted in the chapter, or the concepts that you can connect between each other so you can understand better yet the material that you're expected to learn. And then once you have read the chapter, you have scanned, you have read, you have maybe summarized, even summarized the summary, what you need to do is come up with some questions, kind of like a little self-testing that you're doing, and try to answer those questions and make sure you write those answers. Because as you write the information, then you're better able to encode it in your brain. So later at a test-taking time, when your abilities to recall and recognize some elements, you'll be able to demonstrate that you can do it better because you followed all this process.
All right. So I'm going to hop in now and talk about attending class and reviewing after class. So I have a few strategies that we're going to kind of discuss that are going to help you guys to maintain focus during class and to improve your retention that will hopefully make your studying more effective. So can I get a few people to unmute their mic and answer one of these questions for me? My first question is, do y'all find that classes are different now online versus in person? And if so, how are they different?
Yes, they're different because I feel that when you're on one-on-one in class, you can ask questions right away and you get answered right away. Online, you have to email the professor and it takes them time for them to answer you back. That's what I
Exactly. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else have anything that they want to add, or are finding their classes this semester different from that scenario?
Yeah, I went if when you're in the classroom, you can ask your teacher about tutoring or go to their office for tutoring. However, online, you had to go through either Black for collaboration or another social website to ask questions to them.
Yeah, definitely. So thanks for sharing. My next question is, are y'all finding that y'all have a lot of distractions now with these online classes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then my last question, does anybody have any strategies that they're using right now that they think are effective in helping them navigate these online classes?
For me, just I've been using a calendar on my wall and a planner to write down all my assignments and tests for the semester.
Excellent. That's a great strategy. All right. Well, let's go ahead and go to the next slide, and let's talk a little bit about some tips and strategies for how to really maximize your time in these online classes. So we do have two different kinds of online classes. We do have the synchronous and asynchronous. And so some of these tips I would say work for both, and others may be a little bit different for each. So while we're in class, first things first is you want to have all your materials gathered. So if your professor is lecturing, you want to be at your computer, you want to be ready, you want to have your notebook, everything prepared for when that class starts. Because, you know, if you were an in-person class, your professor would, you know, do a few minutes, get everybody settled, and y'all would be ready to go. Now with the asynchronous class, going into kind of a little bit of that time management piece, it's still important to kind of set aside time to be in an asynchronous class. So you still want to have those materials gathered for yourself. Next thing that's really going to help maximize that time during class and avoid distractions is closing all unnecessary tabs, muting any conversations, putting your cell phone on silent, anything that's going to cause you to lose attention and focus during class. You definitely want to make sure to just not have that temptation anywhere near yourself. Next, I really encourage everybody to taking notes, asking questions. I know Val had said make a list of some self-assessment questions before you even attend class. If you weren't able to answer those, make sure and ask your professor. If there's something you don't understand in class, make sure and ask. If your professor uses a poll or asks you to post a question in the chat, definitely participate. The more you are engaged with the class, the more you are going to maintain your focus, and a lot more of that information is going to be retained. And then the biggest thing, and it's very important, try to avoid just copying lecture notes straight from PowerPoints or anything. Ideally, we want you to take your notes in your own words. Ideally, they're handwritten. It is actually shown that students do retain more when you handwrite notes, just because you cannot write as fast as you can type. So you're actually having to process that information and determine what is the most important information you want to put on that in those notes. So again, with the synchronous class, this is, you know, in class, you're doing it. With the asynchronous class, when you have those lecture notes right in front of you, they may be posted on Blackboard. It might be a little more tempting just to copy it straight from there. But ideally, we want you to sit down and actually process that information before you take the notes. So these are just some strategies to really help you maintain focus during class, and ideally to improve that retention. What we're going to talk about now is reviewing after class. So this is really going to solidify that information and hopefully help that retention process even more. So first things first is review your notes immediately after class. A lot of times we don't do this, and this is a really big thing that we can encourage all of our students to do to help retention. So you lose about 40% of what you hear in lecture, and you actually forget 95% of what you don't write down. So, I mean, some people have great memories and they can always remember, but most of us need to have that extra layer of that handwritten note or something to really help us retain that information. While you're reviewing your notes, you definitely want to see if you have any blanks. If your professor was speaking too quickly and you weren't able to catch something, or you had a question about something on a slide, this is the time to go back and review the PowerPoint, review your textbook, anything where you're going to be able to find that information. And if you still can't find it, go ahead and make a note and make sure to either email your professor or attend office hours. And then big thing that a lot of students forget, and I keep reiterating this, is summarizing in your own words. Using your own words is the best way to process information. Once you actually are sitting down and reflecting on that information and listening and looking through it, you are able to determine what was important, what are the key details that you need to pull out, and that is going to help you in the future when you're creating your study guides or reviewing for an exam. So I'm going to let Jordan speak to you guys a little bit more about the next part of the study cycle.
Thank you, Kelly. So I'm going to be talking about the next part in the cycle. Before I do it, I think we had a question in the chat, or maybe a comment that I wanted to talk about. Maya says, can we speak about being intimidated to interrupt the lecture to ask a question that the teacher has already attempted to explain? And so that's definitely a huge issue, right? Having that confidence. And we talked a little bit about in the beginning about how the virtual space is different. And you guys even mentioned about how you don't have that direct access, right? And you really are kind of managing with that virtual space. And so I definitely will admit that it does take confidence to have that time. If you ever feel like you don't have the ability to ask a lot of questions in class, I definitely recommend either emailing the instructor, connecting with them at their office hours when you're face to face, it's one-on-one. There's they have to address your question, or if you feel like maybe you're not having as productive of an experience with your professor as you would like, connect with the tutor. That's definitely super helpful as well. And just maybe getting a different perspective is something that you need. But great question. And so on to the kind of topic at hand now. My part is going to be on the kind of final leg of the study cycle, which is essentially the overarching narrative of today. And so I actually like this part a lot. It's really the fun part. So up until this point, we've talked about how to prepare for class, making sure that you have your textbook, that you're reading and taking notes in your own words. Kelly talked to us about how to be active and attentive in class, how to review afterwards, being strategic about your notes and participation, and really making the most out of that pre and during course experience. And so let's talk about how to create engaging study material. And so this is the step in the study cycle where you can be more creative, and it's going to be unique for each course, which I like a lot. And so I've kind of broken it down into 3 key areas that you really want to address when creating your study material and what that looks like. And so the first stage, right, is identify important information. So now that you've been reading what's assigned to you, you've been going to class, if it's a synchronous class, you're reviewing your notes, what you want to do is identify important information that could potentially appear on a test, right? And so I would love to hear from you guys, either in the chat, or we definitely welcome you and encourage you to unmute yourself. With the classes that you're taking right now, what kind of information stands out to you as important?
Probably usually when the professor reiterates the information.
Absolutely. Thank you, Linda. Yeah, that's a great sign. Whenever the professor is repeating something, absolutely it's important, right? Anytime as Val kind of mentioned, you're supposed to be reading stuff ahead of time, right? And making notes when you go to class. Anytime you go to class and see something that was mentioned in the textbook and the professor's kind of hitting it home, that's absolutely important and something that you want to pay attention to and highlight, right? Other kinds of important information just generally are things like vocabulary words, terms, those are absolutely important. Diagrams, formulas, absolutely. Thank you, Amber. Any examples given? Thank you, Maya. Main theory concepts, absolutely. If you're in a math class, types of problems. And so I think, that's one of the first things to do is to identify important pieces of information. And so a large part in creating study material is finding a way to mark this information as important so that you can organize it and then the next steps, right? And so let's think through some ways now of how we can mark this information as important. So for example, I know a lot of people like to highlight, right? Does anybody use highlighting in their classes? Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you guys. Yeah. So highlighting, right? That's a huge thing. If you're a visual person, and thank you, Glenette. That's a great point. And so sometimes we can highlight too much, right? Which is where it really gets into being aware of why information is important.
I
Yeah.
sometimes use all caps if it's important, like as well as highlighting.
Well, that's awesome. That's fantastic. I like that a lot, and as well as the bold wording, which was mentioned. And so, absolutely, finding ways to signify to yourself that something is important, that you need to go back and look at something, is absolutely going to be clear. And so, great. So once you've taken the time to identify this important information, you're marking it as something that you want to expand on that could end up on a test. Not going overboard, of course, and highlighting everything, just the key information that you want to expand on, right? The next step is going to be organize. And so you want to organize into a new format. And so we'll look at a couple of examples of study aids in different formats that as academic coaches, we can definitely help you with and help you put together. But definitely that's a huge step, is organizing those pieces of information into different formats. And so, for example, things like outlines or concept maps, which we'll look at a couple of visual examples of. And so the final step of that is going to be practice by examining those conceptual relationships, right? So creating this study material, when you're highlighting those important things and organizing it in a logical way, it's going to really help you internalize those relationships between and within those concepts. And so what does that mean? So essentially, it's to demonstrate a deeper understanding. There's a lot of different types of relationships between that material. It can be something simple, like an A to B relationship, right? Vocabulary word to definition, that the term means this, and you just need to know what a term means. That's something that you can definitely highlight. It can be something that's a visual relationship. For example, if you're in a biology class, having an idea of what a cell looks like, or a phylogenetic tree, or whatever visual that you need, is something that you absolutely want to be looking at. It can be things like cause and effect. For example, if you're in an English class or a history class, having an idea of the sequence of events and the causal relationship could be something that's helpful for you on a test or an exam. And so let's look at a few examples that we have of study aids that you could create and talk about when you would use them in your classes. So let's go ahead and take a look here. Okay. So first example that I have, which I like a lot, is the concept map. It's awesome. It is a great if you're a visual person and need to kind of see those relationships, right? So a concept map, if you're not familiar, essentially you have the main idea in the center, related information connected to it, and then supporting details to help you kind of drive the point home. Has anyone here ever created or used a concept map for any of their classes? Awesome. We got a yes from Patricia. That's great. For career plans, so personal use there, absolutely. Awesome. We got Bethany saying concept maps and flowcharts have saved her life as a med science student. Totally. And so yeah, a concept map essentially lets you visualize those relationships, right? And so one example of kind of creatively using a concept map that I think would be cool, for, for example, like an English class. Let's say you're reading a book with a lot of different characters, right? Instead of trying to just memorize the characters and relationships, what you could do is create sort of a character tree of the main characters, maybe their immediate family, how they're connected, how they knew each other, and use that to kind of think through those key moments in the book. And so that's something, if you feel like you're trying to essentially study for a class like that and you don't want to just keep reading the book over and over again, get creative, do something visual, right? Absolutely. And so I love concept maps, and we definitely have a lot of information and resources on that that we'll link you to at the end of the presentation today. And so let's keep it going and check out the next one here that we've got coming up. So this one is flashcards. So this is a classic, right? I imagine that everyone is pretty familiar with this. When I say study, pretty much a lot of college students will hear flashcards. That's, they're synonymous for a lot of people. Has anyone ever used flashcards right now for their courses? Absolutely. They're fun, right? And a lot of this is why I'm glad I got to present this part, because this is the fun stuff. I like doing these. And so absolutely, flashcards, right? And so that really communicates that A to B relationship, right? You have two pieces of information that you're attempting to connect. And it really helps with memorization. And it's a great way to self-test, which Val and Kelly hit on a little bit as well. And so absolutely, it's a great way to do that. To kind of get creative and recommend a resource for that, has anyone ever heard of or used the website Quizlet? Quizlet, right? I see some nods. I see some yeses. Absolutely. Quizlet is an amazing website. It's a free online resource where you can create your own study sets, which is awesome, and create flashcards. It's some multiple choice capability in there as well. And it's a great way to self-test, where you can have access to it at any point if you don't want to kind of keep up with a bunch of index cards and paper. Okay, so we've got a couple more examples here to look at. Let's see. The next one, timeline. This one is my favorite, and I think it's so clever and creative. So a timeline shows a chronological sequence of events, right? So, you have the kind of beginning and end, a lot of sort of highlighted points. Who can think of a class or situation where they may want to create a timeline? Absolutely. History, that's a great one. Car repairs. That's an interesting one, Maya. I would not have pegged car repairs, but I suppose that you could. Auto tech student. So Maya's an auto tech student, so she would do it for car repairs. Very interesting. And so absolutely, I think the most straightforward one is history, but I love the creative responses here, and so please keep those coming. But absolutely, if you're in a history class, that's a great way of kind of examining those causal relationships, right? And seeing the sequence of events. Another creative example would be doing it for a history class. Let's say if you're having trouble remembering the major plot points, put it on a timeline, draw it out, show that chronology, and kind of break it down so that you're able to better remember it. And a lot of these, the point is just creating them. You're always going to remember something that you made and that you created more than something you read or heard, right? And so, yeah, I absolutely encourage you to get creative with that. Oops, looks like it went away. And so there is one more, I believe. The outline. So last but definitely not least, we got the outline. So it's a list arranged to show that hierarchy. You have the kind of main heading, you got subheadings, and this is something that I think is absolutely useful. Has anyone ever used or heard of an outline in terms of their note taking? Absolutely. Great. We got some yeses. So yeah, it's super cool. A lot of people will use it for essays, right? Exactly. Thank you, Linda. It's a staple in English class when doing a lot of planning. That's amazing. And so we'll talk a little bit more about planning for written responses as well, which I think is super helpful. And that's a great tool for that. But outline can also be a way to revise your notes. So as Kelly mentioned, you're in class, you're writing stuff down. sometimes, and I think we've all been in that class experience when it goes a little bit fast and they're just kind of clicking through and you're just really struggling to get everything down. And maybe you're just doing a bunch of bullet points or just copying what you can. Take time after class to reorganize and restructure your notes in an outline. That's a great opportunity to make sure that everything that you're putting down is purposeful and that you're not doing kind of overboard, which is great. And so,
Can I say something real quick?
please, yeah.
If you have your professor's PowerPoints, there is an option on their PowerPoints for you to see their outline in that program. So just look at that. You can copy that outline, take that outline and go through your textbook and sort of make your own notes or put your notes that you wrote down into an outline using the outline from their PowerPoint. It's been very helpful to me in many of my classes to use their outline view from their PowerPoint and put my notes in it.
Thank you, Bethany, for sharing. That's
You're
awesome.
welcome.
That is great advice, and I definitely encourage you guys to check that out. That's a great tool, and absolutely, if your class does provide a PowerPoint, using that functionality in order to kind of help you reframe and structure your notes, which is going to be super awesome. And so, yes, thanks. So, and thank you guys for chiming in and participating on that. Does anyone have any other examples of study material that they've created or that they've used in their classes? Okay, well, we do have our online resource library, which we're going to link you to at the end, with a lot more examples and ways of thinking through how to be creative and study for your class. And so stay tuned for that. And absolutely, as Maya said, you can always do kind of visual aids or just drawing, which I think is fun anyway to do. Okay, so now I do want to take some time to get into another aspect of studying, critical thinking, right? So what about for the classes that don't rely on memory or frequent practice? How can you study for a class like ethics or writing or philosophy when a lot of the graded portion is going to be from written responses or class discussion? How do you prepare for a class like that, right? And so you definitely want to build on those critical thinking skills. So critical thinking is essentially where you're analyzing facts and important pieces of information to form a judgment, right? It's reasonable, reflective thinking. And so it's a skill that you definitely can develop. And so you may feel like, I just don't have that. I'm not a critical thinker. We always want to have a growth mindset, right? And realize that we can develop these things. And so we're definitely going to talk about, ways to prompt that thought, right? And think through that. And so let's see. So here's just a list of questions that I think it's great to ask if you are preparing for a class like that, right? And it's essentially a list of 5 critical thinking questions to spur that thought. So if you're preparing for an in-class essay, or if you're bringing notes to bring to the discussion and ask in class, this is a great way of expanding the scope of what you're looking at, right? And so I'll just run through it really quick. What's happening, right? That's the first part, gathering the basic information. You want to look at why it's important. Why is this significant? What are the benefits and consequences? Who are the key people that this information impacts? What don't you see? Is there anything important missing? What questions do you have? And so all of these really address that, the key part when you find that important information and highlight it, right? Ask these questions about it and kind of think through this, which is a really helpful exercise. How do you know? How do you know that the information is true? How is it verified? Who is saying it? Who are some of the key speakers and influence? And then what else? What if? What other ideas and possibilities exist? And so I definitely recommend thinking through some or all of these questions when you're preparing and outlining your in-class participation or essay, because it's something that's really beneficial and a great way of evaluating that. And so now we're going to go ahead and move into our activity where we tie all of this together, the pre-class, during class, study aids, and I'm going to go ahead and give it to Kelly.
All right. All right, guys. So as Jordan alluded, it's just a little brief activity, and I kind of want, if I can get a volunteer to read this for us, we want to really hammer home how to look at material and try to pull out what is the most important information. So if I can get a volunteer to read, and then after, I would like y'all to just sit and think about what is this paragraph describing, and what are some of the key facts that you pulled out to determine what the key term that we're looking for is?
An agent that frees from infection with chemicals that destroys vegetation, forms of harmful microorganisms as bacteria and fungi, especially inanimate objects that may be less effective in destroying spores.
All right. Thanks for reading for us. I appreciate that. So now just kind of sit and process. Does anybody have an idea what the key term that we're trying to get y'all to pick out of this? Or what the key term we're trying to get you guys to identify from this topic? Do you have any ideas?
Does anyone need us to go over it again? We have the time.
Yeah. Can anybody identify maybe some key phrases out of this paragraph that might help us determine what the vocabulary term that we're looking for is?
Freeze from infection.
Perfect. That's a great one. Okay, so that's one. Can anybody else identify maybe another thing that might help us identify the term?
Kelly, Maya pointed out in the chat that it's definitely an agent and it's a chemical.
Perfect. Thank you, Maya. All right. Well, do we have any guesses of what the term might be?
Amber says it destroys harmful things such as infection, bacteria, and fungi. Patricia shares destroy, so and microorganisms. There's a connection.
Disinfectant.
Oh, disinfectant. We have a winner.
You're awesome.
Perfect. So y'all did a great job. You were able to identify all of the key phrases that we wanted you to pull out, and we were able to determine that we are trying to identify disinfectant. So this was just a simple activity to try to get y'all to really sit down and focus, use a little bit of those critical thinking skills, those logical reasoning, and really process information and try to pull out what is most important. So when you are taking notes, you could very easily put your key term as disinfectant and a few key phrases that would really help bring that term into the forefront and help you when you are preparing for an exam. All right. So thanks everybody for participating. I appreciate the volunteers who offered up some advice, some suggestions and for reading. So now I kind of want y'all just to kind of process, if you would, what are some study strategies that you are currently using? And now that you've kind of listened to our presentation, is there ways that you can improve those study strategies, or is there something that you guys can add to your study habits that it's going to help you take these online classes and be successful? And I just sit and reflect for a minute, and then if anybody would like to share, or if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask, we're going to open up the floor for anybody to share or ask questions.
I'm taking a math class right now, and my professor posts the test reviews. So I will do the tests a couple times before the tests in order to make sure I have the information down.
Excellent. Another suggestion for math, if your professor gives you a formula chart, or if they don't, make one, but identify what the variables are and, what is that formula solving? That's another good way to process that information.
Maya is sharing that she struggles with focusing for long and even short periods of time. So she's using a timer on her phone to be able to help her stay put and just have like this homework session, which is super awesome management strategy.
It's an excellent technique. Thanks for sharing, Maya.
We also have a question in the chat from Anna. What is the best way to do a study guide with tons of questions? So we're going to get to that, Anna. Let's see if somebody else wants to share. I think Wong wants to share something.
Yes, I try to put away my phone, my mobiles, whenever it's come to classes and study time to avoid the distractions.
Perfect. We all know we can always pick up that phone and go and get lost, and what we thought was going to be a few minutes turns into 30 minutes, and then that's wasting valuable study time. So that is a great tip to share with everybody. All right. So thanks everybody for sharing. I know we had a few questions. Val, are you gonna go ahead and answer?
Yeah, I'd like to know, thanks, Kelly. I'd like to know more about Anna's question. So when you say a study guide with tons of questions, are we talking about a study guide that you're creating yourself? Anna? And the reason why I asked is because it seems like it's oh, okay. See, that's what I was trying to understand. So if you're creating your own study guide, it's not it doesn't matter how many questions you have there. More than likely you don't need a ton of them, but providing that study guide, then actually it's so important. The guide has been provided by the publisher of the textbook, then that might be a different thing. So a great strategy might be to narrow down the content of that, would be to meet with the professor during office hours, and just like bounce back and forth in concept. So then you'll get how much in depth you need to actually know about each thing. Of course, we cannot expect for professors to tell us what's going to be on the test, but it's a good idea to visit with them and see if they didn't create it themselves, then what are the concepts that you need to be focusing most of your time on? However, if you're creating it by yourself, which is ideally what you'd do, that would be, so creating a study guide from the study guide, that sounds crazy, but it's actually very useful. So you might want to consider that. And then again, same thing, always checking with the professor because they're the ones that write the test. So not to mention graded. So they have a specific plan for what they want all students to know by the end of the semester.
And I also really like what Maya said in the chat. So what she does is she rewrites every study guide question using a complete sentence with the correct answer, which is such a great idea. And I think that's so creative, right? So that way you're not thinking of anything in like a fragment, or just memorizing the answer. You're looking for the complete phrase and concept, which is great. And I think that will also help with what Glenette just asked. So she's looking for best ways to make sure that you're learning and retaining the information rather than just memorizing it for a test, right? And I really like what Val mentioned earlier. You really want to be able to essentially feel confident enough to teach that information, right? You want to be able to essentially look at it from their perspective, which is something that is the end goal in a lot of ways that proves that you've retained the information. And so if you feel like you could confidently answer questions from that study guide in complete sentences, that's a great sign. If you feel like you're kind of stuck at the flashcard level with just recognizing kind of that A to B relationship, I really encourage you to get creative with your study material and do some of the other things that we mentioned and some of the other participants mentioned today, and just try to be a little bit more diverse with what you're doing. Instead of just working on the kind of the memorizing way. But yeah, any other questions for us at this point? So yeah, we really just want to open the floor now to any other questions you guys have or anything that you would like expanded on or to share with us.
And while you guys come up with some questions, I just wanted to address something that one of you asked in the beginning. I think it was, how do we interrupt the professor if we feel intimidated or if they already explained the concept? Rest assured, guys, that no professor at ACC or at any other institution wants you to feel intimidated. However, that sometimes happens. You can't control how other people are going to feel. So I know it might sound hard, but although you might feel intimidated, try not to act that way. Just raise your hand and you politely say, like, can you provide us with another example? And if it's still information is not clear, by all means, do what Jordan suggested. Visit during office hours or maybe with a tutor if you feel like, okay, it's just teaching style that I'm not very familiar with, or I don't feel it's my preferred teaching style. And so talking to a tutor might be your best option as well.
Yeah, thanks. And so we got a question in the chat from Jada. How much time should I be studying for each class? Great question. And so as academic coaches, we do have a model that we like to use. Essentially what we say, we go by the 3-hour rule. So for every credit hour of your class, you want to spend approximately 3 hours outside of class. So for example, if you're in a 3 credit hour class, you want to try to find, I generally say, around 6 to 9 hours, depending on your judgment and the difficulty and how much you're able to accomplish within that time. And so, it's something that you should be reflecting on almost consistently, right? Evaluate your schedule from last week. How much time did you spend studying last week, and was that effective? Was that good? Do you feel like you were confident and strong? Was it not enough? Was it overkill? And so you should always be consistently flexing and evaluating that schedule. And so that's something that we can help you with personally as academic coaches. If you make an appointment with us, which we'll talk about in a couple seconds here, we can really look at your schedule and talk about how to study and when to study effectively. So that's a great question that we can definitely talk more about personally.
And if I might add, this, what Jordan just said, goes for both synchronous and asynchronous classes.
Yeah.
So you should not think of how long you spend literally in the classroom. Like, it's a good idea to start from. But for asynchronous classes, it's kind of like self-paced, because there's still assignments that you need to submit it by a certain time and date. However, it all depends on which classes they are, the content they are, how sometimes students have to take required classes that they're not excited about, so probably they'll take longer. So having a great connection will help you, and definitely that's something that we can all support you with by creating a customized time system schedule for your whole week. And so you can be tweaking and adapting depending on the needs. Because as the semester progresses, usually people spend a little bit more time in the beginning, and then they start picking up the pace and just making things happen, hopefully in the best way possible.
And just to add one more thing, we did talk about the first slide was the study cycle. So this is a continuous process, guys. You should be constantly going through each aspect of the cycle throughout the whole week. And so that does hopefully when you do come time to test preparation, this is not a cram session, right? Y'all have been preparing, you have been working, you have been reviewing and creating throughout this whole time. And so that's why it is really important to follow each part of the cycle throughout the whole time.
Yeah.
Also, we have a comment from Bethany that says, for med sciences, double it. Totally true. And also we have to do a lot with not just the amount of information that needs to be learned, but also how they're tested. Because you guys have to, just like a chemistry class or physics class, you have to apply what you learn. And so it might also, if you have cumulative tests or midterms, you might want to adjust for that as well. So each class is going to be different, but as a general rule of thumb, 2 to 3 hours outside of what you're expected to spend in the classroom, that would be a great start.
Great. Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and leave our academic coaching email in the chat. If you do have any more questions, I definitely encourage you to either check out our website or to email us directly because we'd love to respond to you. But let's go ahead and move on to our final couple slides and the next steps here.
I do want to say one thing about the studying before we move on.
Yeah.
The best thing the academic coaches taught me in my first few semesters is the 45 minutes, 15 minutes off. This is no joke, y'all. Your brain will fry. Study that 45 minutes, take that 15 minutes off. And I mean, walk away from the desk or wherever it is that you're studying and rest your brain. I promise you, it sounds counterproductive, but it is literally everything. Get away from the books for 5 to, if your brain can't handle it, do the 5 to 10 minutes, but get away from the books. For every hour that you're working, take that 10 to 15 minute break. I promise you, your brain will love you for it.
Yeah, thank you, Bethany. Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome, and I'm glad that that's a structure that works for you. And we definitely encourage you guys to be conscious and take breaks because it does make a great difference. And so, yeah, so this is a resource that we definitely would love you guys to check out. As Val just posted in the chat, we do have our free online study skills booklet available on our website. That is our website there on the screen, and there's a QR code if you'd like to be directed there. And that's the best and fastest way to get connected with us and some more great study resources. And so definitely check that out when you get a second. We also have a future workshop coming up. So we're doing these workshops now pretty frequently. This one is study skills. We have another one on time management, quarantine style, how to kind of do exactly what we kind of mentioned today, managing your time and multiple commitments and how to make sure that you are spending enough time studying and evening it out, which is really helpful. And that one's on Friday, October 2nd. The more information about that will be available on our website. And last thing, we would love it if you guys could fill out our evaluation link. So we have an evaluation just about your experience with this workshop and your takeaways and if you would change or improve anything. If you have, it takes about 1 minute to go through and fill that out. That would be incredibly helpful for us in continuing to do these in the future. And so that is all I have. Kelly, Val, any final thoughts?
Just to say thank you, and please do an evaluation if you want to improve and continue to bring you new strategies and more helpful suggestions for you guys to be successful.
Thanks for coming. We look forward to seeing y'all at more of these workshops. As Jordan mentioned, they will be continuing throughout the semester. So please check out our website for more updates.
Yeah. And Anna, as far as the recorded videos to these workshops, we do have a playlist on YouTube that is on the link is on our website where we are posting some of the workshops. So we have one right now up on Navigating Blackboard. This one will be up at some point, I believe. And so definitely, if you can't find that, use the email that I posted in the chat and we'll send you a link to find that video. But great question. And yeah, awesome. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Good luck with your semester and hope to see you again.